Thank you, Guillaume, for giving us a talk and this series of talks. So I let you the word. So please go on. Okay.
Okay, so
connecter mon ordinateur de ce côté-là pour le son. Je vais juste fermer.
Okay, so just maybe for linear regression, so you have a
Ah, mais maintenant j'entends, c'est parfait.
equal to x times theta. You have the explanatory variable plus some noise. If you want to apply this kind of method on the compositional data, you can see that it's not really a good idea, because here you have the true, if you have the true data, even if it works, when you want some estimated values in the hat, well, maybe the values won't be contained in the simplex. You will always have the y hat. Sorry. You will always have the sum that is equal to 1, because this is a linear regression. So there is no problem with that, but maybe you will have, for example, y hat d that is equal to -5. This is possible. And there is no sense at all to have one composition, one component that is not positive. Okay, so linear regression, obviously, it's not good. Maybe you can have another kind of regression. Okay, so maybe it's not a non-linear regression. Okay, with a function f depending on theta. And you can say that your estimated values, okay, you estimate theta with theta hat, will be in the interval 0, 1. Okay? If you choose correctly your function f, okay, there is no problem. But it will be very difficult to be sure that the sum will be equal to 1. Because in general, you will have, because y hat is a vector, you will have d different function f, actually, f1, f2, etc. So maybe the sum won't be equal to 1. So this can be an issue. So classical methods, actually, they do not work well with the raw compositional data. So we have to use different strategies. In the following, we will assume that we have a sample of big N compositional data that are realization of big Y random variables valued in the simplex. Okay, so don't forget that each of these data are vectors at for some 40 between 1 and n. And we will consider k explanatory variables that are valued in R. So it can be either the water depth or the precipitation. And for Y1, it's a composition of sand, Y2 is composition of silt, etc., etc. Because we cannot use classical methods, the first strategy, historically, the first strategy is to transform the data. Okay, we cannot use a linear regression, for example, on the raw data, so we will transform the data. So the general idea is to choose one appropriate application G that goes from the simplex to RK. Okay, it could be RD -1 or RD, it depends. And then we will apply our classical method on the transform data. The transform data, I will denote them Z, so Z1, Z2, up to Zn. And we have the same covariates with X1 up to Xk. So you have to choose properly the application G. It can be whatever you want, but it has to be a one-to-one mapping. And then when we have a prediction Z hat on the transform scale, it is easy to come back to the original scale and to have an estimation predicted value Y hat that is equal to G minus 1 Z hat. So historically, this is the first method used in compositional regression. So it's kind of easy. And generally, we consider as a function G. Okay, so here it's called LR for additive log ratio. So it's the application G that goes from the simplex to RD minus 1. And we choose the last component as reference component. And we take a transformation log of yi divided by yd. So this is a one-to-one mapping. It's quite easy to prove. And the inverse transformation, so ALR minus 1 is given by this formula. Yes, so this is something very, very, very easy. So this is just in order to transform the data, to go to the transform scale and to go back on the original scale. Okay, so maybe there are some questions, I don't know.
You transform just the dependent variable and you don't transform
the covariates, no, they are still the same.
And do you think that then after you transform the data, you can apply simple linear regression?
Yes.
Do you think also another question? Do you think that the problem that you said that you have a value of yg that is greater than 1 cannot be solved by assuming some constriction about the parameter space method?
Ah, yes. If we have some restrictions on beta?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it works.
It works, yeah.
Maybe it works. I asked myself the question really quick because I did not find the time to answer it. But yes, I think that maybe.
I don't know why, just
yeah,
this position.
I don't know either. But yeah, maybe it's a good idea to impose some restrictions on beta, and it works. So it will be like a linear regression under some constraints. I think it's yeah, I think it's possible because there is optimization under some constraints with some Lagrangian or something like that. Maybe we can imagine a strategy that is similar. Maybe yes. Okay, so the idea is just to transform the data, apply.
Can you back a second? What is Z?
Oh, Z is just, yeah, I will write it just on the side. Z are the transformed data. So Z1 is Z1 to Z minus 1. It's equal to G of Y1, YD. Okay. And in this case, G it's the additive log ratio function.
Is this function? Yeah. Okay.
And the additive log ratio, yeah, it's defined here. Okay, so everybody understands the strategy? I think it's the simplest strategy. You will see that it works quite well. And yeah, when d is equal to 2, the additive log ratio is just a logit transform. Okay, we call that the logit of x is log of x divided by 1 minus x. Okay, so in the case where we just have scalar values, because we have just one proportion to study, this is the additive log ratio, this is the logit transform. Okay, so if we take the example of the forest cover, just show you some graphics. You have on the left side the transform data. Okay, so here it was the percentage of forest cover by the trees, depending on the mean annual precipitation. So on the left, you have the transform data by the logit transform, because we have just one proportion. So as you can see, a linear regression is well suited for this problem. So in blue, you have the real values, and in purple, we have the fitted values with the linear regression. And then on the right, we have the back transformed data. So we apply the inverse additive log ratio to the fitted values on the left to obtain this second graphics. So in blue, you still have the real values that are the forest cover for each quadrant. So you have normally for each precipitation, you have 15 different data. And in red, sorry, you have the mean value for each precipitation. So I think it is more clever to compare the purple points with the red ones. And as you can see, this strategy works quite well. It's not that far from the red points. Even if for some extreme values, it can be quite far. But still, this is the first strategy possible to address this regression problem. So we transform the data, we make a regression, and then we back transform. Yes?
I don't understand the differences between purple point and red point.
Yes, the red points, these are just the mean for each precipitation.
Okay.
For example, with 500 millimeters of rain, I had I had 15 quadrats. I have like 15 tiny forests where I measured the tree cover. So there was one forest with a tree cover of maybe 10%. One other forest with maybe 70% of tree cover. And the red point is just the mean of all these tiny forests. Okay, so I take the mean of each of the points on this vertical line for the red point. Because for one value of precipitation, we can have several data.
But I don't understand why this is upper.
And in purple, it's just the regression that we apply.
Okay, yeah. But it's not in blue, it's not the average of.
No, in blue, it's not the average. This is all the data in blue.
Okay.
We have a scatter plot of all the data.
But I don't so very well the graphic, but we can't have a red point upper blue, no? Because the red point is blue. And blue is.
Well, the red point can be under or above all the blue. But you can have, if you take the mean, you have some blue points that are above the red one and some that are below. That is normal. If you take on a class if you take the grades of the students, if the mean is 10, you will have some students with 5 or less, and some students with 20, for example. And that is it. Because here, sorry, this is just the proportion of tree cover for one forest, a second forest, a third forest. And each time I take the mean of this
Yeah, sorry.
15 forests.
I was confused. I
Yeah.
think about the minimum value and not the mean.
No, it's the mean, it's not the minimum.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I see. I was talking about the mean,
Yeah.
MEAN, and not mean. Yes,
Okay, okay.
no problem. Okay, so this is the first example with just one proportion to study. And it is equal to 2. If we take the Arctic Lake case, so we have here the sand, the silt, and clay components. So there are 3 compositions to take into account. We actually had 39 data. And if we apply the additive log ratio transform, so we have data that are in the simplex with 3 components. We will have transform data with only 2 components. Okay. That we call Z1 and Z2. And here I just put the scatter plot of the first transformed component here in blue, according to the water depth. And in red, this is the second component. So at each time we have 39 points. So these are the data of the transformed scale. As you can see, a linear regression won't be a good idea. Okay. It's clearly not linear. So here on the transformed data, we will have to think about a nonlinear regression.
Sorry, water depth is equally spaced.
Sorry, what?
Water depth, the variable, the observation of Z1 and Z2 on water depth are equally spaced in the space.
Yeah, because yeah.
So
You mean on the X scale?
yeah,
Yeah, because here it's, for example, we have one sediment,
okay.
and this is the first coordinate of its transformed composition.
Okay, okay, not really, okay.
Here it's the second coordinate of the same sediment that was sampled at the same water depth.
Ouais. Ouais.
Second coordinate and here the first coordinate.
Ah.
All the transformed,
Ouais.
Par rapport à l'examen, tu
Ouais. Ouais.
par rapport au comptage des points.
So
Oui.
Here we apply a nonlinear regression. I don't exactly
d'accord.
remember, I think it's written here.
Yes.
I decided to model this data by a polynomial of order 2. There are more intelligent
Oh
strategies.
mince, putain, j'ai oublié le container. Ah oui, du coup, oui, c'est tout pareil. Ouais.
We can try. And I applied the nonlinear least square regression on the transformed
J'ai
data.
oublié de compter un exemple en fait.
Okay, and then
Donc,
apply the
3, 4.
additive log ratio to have the fitted values on the original scale. So let's just see what it gives. Okay. So don't forget that
Ouais, donc en fait, du coup, ça fait 8.
in red, you have the original proportion,
Ouais. Ah oui, oui, non, mais il faut que je change. Là.
play, and
Ouais, donc, ouais, non, mais t'as bien fait de venir voir.
Bah,
Normalement, ça n'arrive pas, mais
these are model.
j'ai oublié de compter un exemple.
Okay, so I decided to choose an angle that where we can see something. Then maybe it's quite hard, but
Bon, bah, désolé. T'as bien fait de venir.
values, the fitted values,
Je vais faire corriger la note.
the real one.
Ah bon?
There is a strange thing here, but actually it depends on the angle that we choose to look at the data, because some data here are closer than we think. So it's quite normal. And yeah, so this is also a quite good fit. There are some data that are very, very far, but I think that there are outliers. Yeah. Okay, so it's an easy technique, but there are some issues that can occur because we make our regression on the transform scale. So maybe our regression on the transform scale is unbiased, but when we apply the back transformation is in general not linear. For the additive log ratio, it's not linear at all. And thus it can introduce some more bias. Okay, so even if you have a good fit on the transform scale, maybe on the original scale it will be a total mess. You don't know. So this is one big issue with this simple technique. The other problem, okay, so yes, this problem is due to Jensen's inequality. Okay, so that's just what I said. And the other problem is a problem of interpretation, because the coefficient that you estimate on the transform scale, they will have maybe no interpretation on the original one, or it will be very difficult to have a good interpretation of those parameters. So we will have, for this kind of problem, if we want to have a good interpretation of the parameters, we will have another approach, another strategy, which is sort of stay in the simplex. We don't want to use a transform scale. We want to stay in the simplex space. So I will talk first about the most simple one. So the strategy is to assume that each random variable big Y will have a specific distribution valued in the simplex. And first, yes, the most simple case is when d is equal to 2, and we only have one proportion to study. So in this case, there is a strategy that is called the beta regression. In beta regression, we will suppose that each random variable big Y follows the beta distribution B of Pt Qt. Okay. So I will just recall just a little bit later what is the beta distribution. But why we want to choose this kind of law? Actually, different values of P or Q, the beta law, we will make some very different densities. Okay, so I have some graphics here. So maybe it's quite difficult to see. But on the website, maybe it will be easier, it will be bigger. When the slides will be on the website. But as you can see, you can choose where the density is very strong or very low by choosing some the parameters P or Q. Here P is equal to for the blue one. Okay, so maybe not an uniform law, but close to an uniform law. We have P is equal to 0.75 and 5 for Q. And for the last graphic, you have a Q that is equal to 200 and P that is equal to 0.05, 0.25, 0.50, etc., etc. So we hope that with the beta distribution, we will approach quite well the real density of the response variable big Y. So that is why we choose this kind of distribution. So the beta law, it's a distribution that has a density given by this function. Okay, so you have a gamma of p plus q divided by gamma p times gamma q, where gamma is the gamma function. The beta distribution is supported by the interval 0, 1. And you have y at the power p minus 1 times 1 minus 1 at the power q minus 1. Okay, so this is a real important distribution that is very flexible and well suited for modelization. And the gamma function, just for a little reminder if you forgot, this is defined by this integral. So gamma of x is integral from 0 to plus infinity of t power x minus 1 times exponential minus t. So there are some important properties of the gamma function. The first one is that gamma of x plus 1 is equal to x times gamma x. This is very useful for the next calculations. And you have the gamma function. There is also another Eulerian function that is called the beta function, defined by this integral. We will also use it later. So this time is the integral on the interval 0, 1 of t at the power a minus 1 times 1 minus t at the power b minus 1. So this beta function depends on two different parameters. Okay, so this is just for the density to be complete this gamma function. Why beta function will be useful? Because actually it's linked to the gamma function. We have beta of AB is equal to gamma A times gamma B divided by gamma A plus B. So this is another important relation. The first property about the beta distribution is parameters P and Q. That is, we have the expected value of y is equal to P divided by P plus Q, and the variance is given by P times Q divided by P plus Q squared times P plus Q plus 1. So it's quite easy to show. Maybe we just make this small. Have some time. It's quite important to well understand these properties. Okay, if we take the expected value of y, so it's a function. No, sorry. It's y times y at the power p times okay. So minus 1. So obviously we have y at the power p we have to multiply by the correct scalar. And as you can see here, you have exactly the definition of one beta function. Okay, so here, this is beta of p plus 1 and q. Right. Okay, but beta of p plus 1 q, if we use the last relation here on the slide, you have gamma of p plus 1 times gamma q divided by gamma of p plus q plus 1. Multiplied by the same constant here. And now we can use the relationship here that gamma x plus 1 is equal to x times gamma x. So here with gamma of p plus 1, this is p gamma p times gamma q divided by p plus q gamma of p plus q. And now there are a lot of simplifications because there are q and gamma p plus q. So we have p divided by p plus q. So for the expected value, it's quite simple equation to do. And as you can imagine, this is the same for the variance because you just have one more computation to make, that is the expected value of y squared, but it works the same way. Okay, because here we just have y at the power 2. You have the same kind of argument, and you can obtain the variance given here. So it's, you can do it very quickly. I will let you do it maybe on your own. But this is the same logic. Okay, so we assume that our response variable follows beta distribution. The beta distribution depends on two parameters, p and q. But maybe these parameters are not the most useful, because what we want to do in regression is especially to have some good predicted values. And in general, our predicted value is the mean, the expected value of the response variable. So we will use a different parameterization. Okay, so we still assume that our response variable is the beta distribution, but we will propose a different density function. Okay, so this density function will give it now. The response variable y is a beta distribution. We will denote mu, that is the expected value of y. It's p divided by p plus q. And phi, that is just p plus q. Well, it occurs that the expected value y is equal to mu, and the variance is equal to mu times 1 minus mu divided by 1 plus phi. And with those two parameters mu and phi, we can write the density function gamma phi divided by this quite ugly formula. And here the power of y, where you have mu times phi minus 1. Here it's 1 minus 1, y at the power 1 minus mu times phi minus 1. So mu here is included in the interval 0, 1, because it is the expected value. And phi is strictly positive. So why this parameterization is quite interesting? Because the two parameters of interest, nu and phi, are for nu is the expected value. So this is the mean of the response variable. And phi, this is kind of a kind of dispersion parameter. Because the greater phi is, the smaller is the variance. Okay, so for our estimation, it's quite good because we have an estimation maybe of nu, it will be the predicted value, and the estimation of phi will be some indication of variability. So we will work in our model with this parameterization of the beta density. So we will suppose that the response variable has a mean ut and an unknown dispersion phi. For simplification purpose, I decided that the parameter dispersion phi will be constant, will be the same for all the response variables. So it's not the case all the time.
T is the time, huh?
It's not necessarily the time. It could be another index. Actually, for example, in the Arctic Lake data, we have 39 samples. So T is between 1 and 39, but it could be I or J. Or...
What is the depth in the case of the ice? Was
In
depth,
the YT is just the composition of
no,
the
I think
sediment.
T in the Arctic ice that you said, no? Was the
Arctic
depth?
Lake?
Yes, was
No.
the depth?
No. There are 39 water depths different,
Okay.
but actually the depth, I will call it XT. Of X1.
So it's a covariate.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the depth is the explanatory variable, yes.
Okay.
And the composition is Y1 to Y39. But at each time, there are 3 components. Y11, Y12, Y1.
So in this case, T is the time.
And T, yeah, it corresponds to the number of the sample because we have 39 sediments different.
The space, so basically, because of different observation.
Yeah, we have T is the number of the observation.
Yeah,
It's not the time. For a time series, it is the time, but
yeah, no, I understand.
yeah, this is no time dependence, but yes, you can assume that it's the time in some way. Okay, so here with the response variable, we will suppose that the expected value ut will depend, is not the same for each observation, and it will depend on the covariate.
So sorry,
Yeah.
the last question. Each X1, X2, Xt is independent.
Yes, we can.
structure in T.
You can think. Yes, it should be independent.
For this, use assume a
Mm,
direct
mm.
distribution for Y.
It's yes, because it's just water depth. So yes, you can assume it's they are dependent.
But it's your function. If you assume a multinomial beta distribution for Y, it should be independent. No?
I'm sorry, I did not understand exactly what you.
If you as assumed now that Y is distributed as a multinomial beta, then all the Y for your model are independent.
Yeah, sorry, the Arctic Lake maybe it was not a good example. That's right, because I was talking in more general case, but here we deal with just one proportion.
Okay.
So there is just
So in
one.
this case, it's not multinomial, but it's beta.
Yes, it's just beta.
Okay.
Maybe that's why you were confused. I'm sorry. Yes, the Y are just one proportion here.
Okay.
Later, it will be more than one. But for now, just for beta regression, we just have one proportion to study. And Yes, in this case, it was the precipitation, the rainfall. And here, this is the forest cover by the trees. Sorry. So it's not up to 39, we have 300 values.
Doesn't matter. You can
But
just
yeah.
pretend.
Just for clarification. And yes, so the mean value will depend on the covariate. That's why we assume that there is a link function G here. In general, it's the logit. It is the logit function. It could be something else. And we suppose that the mean value will depend on some covariates X that are the observation at some for some sample, and beta k are some regression parameters. So here, in general, G is just a logit function. We will assume that for an observation T, okay, so you have Y T that follows a beta distribution parameters mu T and phi, and we assume that log mu T divided by 1 minus mu T is equal to some linear combination of the covariates. Okay, so in our case, with the forest cover, we just have one covariate, that is the rainfall, the amount of precipitation. Okay, so you can write, of course, take, you can write the expected value according to the covariate directly. Yes?
Just a question. In our case, xt
Yes.
is just precipitation or,
Yes.
or depth.
We have just one regression parameter,
Yeah, okay.
one covariate. So sometimes you can have a second one because you can have an intercept. You can have a constant. For example, with precipitation. So, like I said, we have 300 observations. Okay, so this is a forest cover. We have the rainfall. So this is X. We call it okay, X11 up to X1 or let's say T first. So this is the first covariate, but you can have an intercept, and in this case, all the values are equal to 1.
Bon.
Okay, it's just if you want that this linear combination actually writes beta 1 xt1 plus a constant term beta 2. If you want to add a constant term, so you can imagine that there is actually two covariates but only one that is true.
Another question. Now, basically, if I will understand, in the forest cover example, T, and the 300 is the number of square that
Yeah.
you show in the
Yeah, the number of quadrats between the 20 different forests.
yeah that you showed the first simulation. And how you can have, just a curiosity, the rainfall for each square?
Oh, for each because
This
I
is
decided
there or there,
to simulate 20 big forests,
Okay.
and I decided that the rainfall is so for the first forest there is only 125 millimeters
Okay.
of water of rain during the year. The same for the second because it's just the second quadrat, and then I decided to simulate with rainfall with 250 millimeters, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And at the end, it's 200. And so I already know
Yeah.
that because in this simulation, I decided that I will have 15 forests with 125 or 15 little squares with 125. 15 other with 250, etc., etc.
Yeah, but basically, if you consider just one forest, X is a constant.
Yeah, because
Okay.
but here, yeah, because I have a different forest. So,
Yeah.
that's what I wanted to say something else, but maybe it's later. Okay, so here in this strategy, we assume that the response variable follows a beta distribution, and we also assume that the dispersion parameter is always the same, but the expected value will depend on the covariates. So there is an important remark with this logit function, logit link function. Assume that for one regressor, for one covariate, this is modified by C units, and all other covariates remain unchanged. So, okay. I will just write it. I want this to be quite clear. We have some okay, G of T equal to xt1 times 1 times beta k. K covariate. And assume that for some reason, there is one, the K3 regressor, so maybe for K0. I have one modification. Okay, for one index in the sum, I add C units for this covariate. Okay, there is a modification in the explanatory variables for the index K0. The covariate is increased or decreased by C units. So in this case, we have a different mean that is not mu t but nu t. And we have this relation, so it's the same as before, but we have this term more. So here you have the original expected value and the new expected value. with this modification of the covariates, you can show that exponential of C beta K is equal to this ratio. Okay, maybe we will do it just after. So this is an important interpretation in terms of odds ratio. Because here in the numerator, you have the think about the forest cover. You have the proportion of tree cover divided by the proportion of the forest that has no tree. So you compare the proportion of trees with the proportion of no trees. And here, so this is called here this is called an odds ratio. Here you have the same thing. So the proportion of trees divided by the part of trees divided by the part of no trees. And if you take this big ratio, you see how the proportion of trees versus no trees evolve. Okay, so if there is C more, I don't know if there is a C millimeters of rain, here we will have the evolution of tree cover versus no tree after and before. Okay, you have the proportion of evolution of the tree cover versus no tree cover. Yeah. And the odds ratio, sometimes it's quite important to study that. So the regressor parameter beta k, it has an interpretation here in terms of odds ratio. Okay, it has a meaning. And it's quite important because when we use the data transformation, like we said, the regression we made in the transform scale, there was no interpretation for all the regression parameters. Here, this is not an easy interpretation, but still, we can interpret the parameter beta k in terms of odds ratio. That means that we can give us an information about the evolution of the odds. Said that here it's a proportion of tree versus no tree. Maybe with another example, I should use carefully. Maybe if you I don't know, maybe it's stupid, but let's say you have a sample of water, and in this water you want to measure some composition of some proportions, maybe of salt in this water. You take a sample of water C. Okay, so you have the first. I'm not a good drawer. Maybe it's a drop.
Water of Barcelona is important, for instance.
And maybe you have, I don't know, 40% salt. But maybe this proportion of salt depends on some covariates. Here, the odds it's 0.4 divided by 0.6. You take salt versus all the rest. If I change the covariates by C units, like I said, here it's the expected value is mu t 0.4. Maybe it's not 0.4, but 0.3. And this is my new expected value. The odds have changed. Okay. So it takes proportion of salt versus all the rest. And I can measure the evolution of the odds with this odds ratio. Here. So the odds ratio, it's somehow, I think that we can say that you measure le rapport de force en français entre les between different compositions. And this rapport de force, well, it is given by this relation. Okay, if the number k for the regressor is modified by c units, and you know the coefficient beta k, you can know this evolution in the composition. So this is an important interpretation with the beta regression of all the parameters here.
Sorry, I missed why you needed to add the c times beta k 0.
Just if I assume that the covariates are k0,
Okay.
it has changed of c units.
Okay.
Okay, I assume, for example, if this is the precipitation, maybe there was not 500 millimeters of water, but maybe 100 more millimeters. So I can compute the new expected value for the tree cover. And here, in this example, C will be equal to 100.
Okay.
And I can know, if I know this parameter, I know that the odds ratio for the tree cover will be equal to this quantity here.
In order to make a robust the result, something like that. No.
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. But I think it's important to know that, just to know that those are not quite strange coefficients that we don't know what they do and why they are here. They have a special meaning.
Taking account error measurement could be also a reason to make this in the covariates. Could be.
Maybe. I don't know. Okay, so this is a real strength of the beta distribution. So yes, we have a density. Now that we have a model, we know that the response variable follow a beta distribution. We can estimate the parameters, and it's done by a maximum likelihood. Okay, because we know the density, we can compute the likelihood of the model, and we can compute the maximum likelihood. There is no closed form for these estimators. That's no surprise. I think you should know that. So there are different algorithms to perform the optimization to obtain the maximum likelihood. For example, a Newton algorithm. Okay, so long story short, if I take the forest cover example, I assume that the mean of the response variable, that is the forest cover, has a logit link with a linear combination of the rain and an intercept. Okay, so xt is the mean annual precipitation in millimeter per year. And we decided to add an intercept here. So we also have a coefficient alpha, or beta 1 and beta 2 if you prefer. So we obtained some estimators for alpha, beta, and the dispersion parameter psi. So it's not very important. Values are not important here. Okay, and in the green line here are the expected value. So the green line actually are the mu t. Okay. We know the values of beta and alpha for beta 1 and beta 2. So we can obtain the mean, the expected value for each response variable according to the annual precipitation. And we drew it in green here on this graphic. So in purple, it's still the first strategy with the data transform. It was an additive log ratio transform. And in green, it is the beta regression where we stayed in the simplex. In red, we still have the mean value, mean with an E and A, and not an I. And as you can see, well, visually, both methods, they seem a little different, but they seem to work quite well. I think that with the beta regression, maybe we are closer to the red point than the purple one. I computed just the mean square error for both methods to know which one was maybe the fittest, the closest to the true values. So this is quite similar, maybe a little better for beta regression. But actually, I am not sure that the mean square error is a good indicator here.
The mean square error is on the residuals of the regression. The square error is on the residual of the regression.
Yes, actually, yes.
But did you try to compare the histogram of the residuals via the histogram of the beta distribution?
No, I did not do that. Actually, that's, I will not say funny, but interesting because I was just talking with Paul before, and I do not know, from my personal background, I do not know many test hypotheses or validation diagnostics for this kind of regression. And that's something I want to study in the next few weeks. I decided not to really to talk about those diagnostic measures today because I'm not really comfortable with them. I know that there exists a lot of possible things.
Yeah.
And for example, yes, we can compare some histograms, but yeah, I do not really know how to do that well. So I prefer not to tell something than to tell some stupid things. Because I would maybe I would say some mistakes or some errors. So I prefer, but yes, there are a lot of possible things to do. We will later on the next on the later section. We will study a little the residuals because the residuals must follow some kind of law. And we will take a look at it later, but just a quick look. Okay, so for beta regression, this is just a link function for the mean for the expected value. Now we will talk about the Dirichlet regression. It's actually a generalization of the beta regression, but for more than two proportions to study. So here we assume that we have more than 3 components. For example, the Arctic Lake case. And there is a generalization of the beta distribution, which is the Dirichlet distribution. Okay, so I know that this is a bit ugly to look at. If we want to make things simple, or maybe simpler, now we will assume that each response variable will follow that what we call a Dirichlet distribution. So Dirichlet distribution, there are d parameters alpha 1 to alpha d. And there is a density function that is equal to So gamma of the sum of alpha I divided by the product gamma alpha I times the product of the yi at the power alpha I minus 1. Okay, as long as the sum of the yi is equal to 1 and they all belong to the interval 0, 1. Okay, so here there are a lot of indicator functions, some direct math, if we want to write it with a lot of rigor. But if you should remember something, that the Dirichlet distribution, there is a density, which is given by this function here, with those two constraints. Okay, so why do we choose the Dirichlet distribution when we have more than 2 proportions? It is because it's a good generalization of the beta distribution. Actually, for a random vector that follows the distribution, the Dirichlet distribution, if we denote phi the sum of all the parameters alpha I, we have that each, it's not xi, it's yi, sorry. Each marginal yi follows a beta distribution. Okay, so the marginal y, it's not an x, it's a yi, follows the beta distribution of parameters alpha I for p, and q is equal to phi minus alpha I. So that's why we use the Dirichlet distribution. It's a generalization of the beta distribution, and we already know that beta distribution was very well suited for modelization because we could approach every kind of distribution. So it is the same with the Dirichlet distribution. I did not manage to do some nice plots in 3 dimensions, but this is really a good distribution if we want to model all kinds of distribution. Yes.
Just a question. The Dirichlet distribution was created by the proposition. It's not. It was preliminary.
Or do you think? Oh, you want to say that the Dirichlet distribution was created before the beta?
No, not before, but we use that proposition to create the Dirichlet distribution. It was the main idea. No.
I don't know, because when we want to, we'll talk about that later. Actually, when we want to simulate a Dirichlet distribution, we do not use beta distribution. Okay. We use gamma distribution. It's another law of probability. I think that's just, I don't know if we use beta distributions to build the Dirichlet, but you know, for beta distribution, we have density. It was okay, so y must be contained in the interval 0, 1. But it was y minus p minus 1 times 1 minus y at the power q minus 1. I think that the idea one day was to say, okay, that's for one proportion. So we have the proportion studied and the rest. If we have 3 proportions, well, that seems quite of natural to say that it must look like and multiplied by some good indicator function.
Okay.
Because here y3 is the last component. Don't forget that this is 1 minus y1 minus y2. So this is really okay. We take the first density function and we try to adapt it, but with more than two proportions.
And to prove this proposition, it's just integral calculus with
Yes.
marginal loads.
Yes, actually, maybe it will be a bit longer. But the idea is to take. Well, I don't know if maybe there is more simple, but what I do in order to prove that is to take a function h. It is continuous. And bounded. And it's quite technical. It's not that difficult to compute. Y1. Just to be more simple. Okay, so there are multiple integrals. Il y a différentes gammas paramètres. Voilà. And I don't remember exactly, but there is just at some time there is just a variable substitution. Because here, this part, you can take 1 minus sum is equal to 2 minus 1 I minus y1. And you can decide to factorize by 1 minus the sum. Okay, you take out this part. Yes, you have just a Jacobian to compute after. It's just not very difficult, but there is a Jacobian to compute, and everything is well. I think this is good to see that because here you have the part 1 minus. You have almost the part 1 minus y at the power q that you have in the beta distribution. Okay, so you take out this, you factorize, you take out this part out, and you make.
What is going value random variables? There is something between binomial and multinomial.
Yes, this is the same logic, same argument. If you want, because here I could not print them, but I have a clean version, a clean PDF version with all the proofs and all the computations. If you want.
So we should put them online.
Yeah, no problem. I hope there are not too many mistakes, but I think it's good. Okay, so you just this is a must-know criterion, obviously, for in order to know the distribution of a random variable. And at the end, you make a variable substitution, and you just have something like h of y, 1 at the power y. Okay, so here this is the density of a beta distribution. So it's like you have the expectancy of u with u following distribution. And if you have this, you know that the variable y1 follows a good distribution. So it's not difficult, but it's only technical. Okay. So we will follow the same steps as in beta regression. Our parameter of interest will be the expected value, so the mean vector of the response variable. We also want a dispersion parameter. The dispersion parameter phi will be actually the sum of all the alpha I and the mean vector. Here it's alpha 1 divided by phi up to alpha d divided by phi. Okay, so the expected vector of the response variable is nu, and the variance of each marginal is given by nu I times 1, there is 1 here that is missing, minus mu I divided by phi plus 1. So here, as you can see, phi is also a dispersion parameter. When phi increases, the variance decreases. Okay, so there is with this parameterization, the density can write this way. There is no difference, just that alpha 1 is phi times mu 1, etc. So it is written this way. And just like before, we have some link function. Okay, so for the expected value, ut, so this time ut is a vector. Okay, we have for one response variable, t. Here, this is the response variable. The expected value is equal to 1. And in order to follow the same steps, we use a multinomial logit link function. Here, so we assume that uti for the component I is given by this relation. Okay, so this time there is several regression parameters with I that depends on the composition, on the component. Okay, we'll just go a little faster because we have the same interpretation in terms of odds ratio for each of the parameters beta I. We obtain the estimation of the vectors beta by maximum likelihood. And I propose that we just go to the Arctic Lake example. Maybe it will be more clear. Because in the Arctic Lake example, we just have the water depth as a covariate. And I decided that one covariate was not enough. So I decided to add one intercept and the square of the water depth. I will maybe explain why. Okay, so here, if I want to sum up the situation, we have all the sediment composition, 39 sediment composition, with the regressors that are the intersect, just to have a constant term in the link function. We have the water depth. Okay, so it's x1, x39. And we have the water depth, but the square. Okay, so we assume that the expected value is linked to the regressors by this formula. Okay, so for y is equal to 1 or 2, so for the two first components that are sand and silt, we have this formula, and for the last component, which is the clay, we have this formula. Okay, and xt is the water depth. So by maximum likelihood, we obtain an estimation of all the coefficients, alpha I, beta 1 I, and beta 2 I. So I is equal to 1 or 2. And we obtain also an estimation for the dispersion parameter. Okay, so as you can see, we have some values that are very low, but they are important and won't produce the same fit at all. And here, I just put the scatter plot of so the real values are in green. The blue values are the fitted values with a transformation, with the additive log ratio transformation. And in red, you have the fitted values with the Dirichlet distribution, which is very close to the fitted values obtained by data transformation. So you can say, we can say that there is almost no difference between the Dirichlet regression and the data transformation. Even if we compute the mean square error, as you can see, it's almost the same. So the Dirichlet regression behaves quite similarly as the first strategy we had.
Well, you can perform better.
A little better. A little better. Okay, there is something maybe interesting that is quite a little visual diagnostic with this stay in the simplex approach. Okay, if you have just the beta regression or the Dirichlet regression, in all these cases, the response variable follows a beta distribution for the marginal. For each marginal component, this is a beta distribution. If we have just one proportion, this is already a beta distribution. And if there are three components, each marginal follows a beta distribution. Okay. In the case of the Dirichlet model, the marginal yj follows this distribution. If the model is correct, if we denote the cumulative distribution function of this beta distribution for fj, we know that the random variable fj of yj follows a uniform law on the interval 0, 1. And if we apply the inverse cumulative distribution of standard Gaussian law, we have Rj here, the random variable Rj, that follows centered normal distribution with variance 1. So in the literature, the random variables Rj are called pseudo-residuals of the regression. And if the model is correct, they should follow a standard Gaussian distribution. So what we can do is to draw some QQ plots of the pseudo-residuals with the parameters that we obtain by estimation. Okay, so here we have the QQ plot for the sand pseudo-residuals. Here's the QQ plot for the silt pseudo-residuals and for the clay. Okay, so the first one and the third one are okay. The second, well, it's not perfect. Okay, recall for everyone here that here we have the line of equation y is equal to x, and here we have the theoretical quantile versus the empirical quantile. So normally the quantiles should be the same if the model is correct. It's not exactly the case with the silt pseudo-residuals.
So some way to make a test, you use a kind of convolved Helmholtz test.
Oh, sorry, I did not study that, so I will not say. I actually don't know exactly how it works. That might seem quite ridiculous, but I really don't know how it works. But like I said, I think there are a lot of tests possible that I need to learn. Because I think there are many things that can be done that do not exist in all the articles I could read in the past few months.
Not exists
Yeah.
in the independent case and also in the dependent case.
Okay. Okay. Yes. I think it should be yes, a good test.
Because we are speaking about testing the model.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this could be a good idea to investigate this in this case. So.
Basically, you transform the residuals that you obtained in the regression, which was supposed to be beta distributed, in order to be normal distributed with the formula that you showed before. This is the what do you do? What do you do?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I apply.
This fit, this.
Okay. Here this has the fit values.
The fit value.
These are the fitted values.
Okay.
The fitted values are supposed to. We know the law of the fitted values.
Yeah.
Here, actually, we don't know the law of the residuals. We only know the law of the fitted values.
But the residual should be not. Why you don't know the law? If you assume that the dependent value is beta, and then, for instance, in some case you have just a constant in the covariance, then the residual should be also beta. If you assume that the dependent variable is beta, for instance, in the case of cover forest, or not, I don't know.
I'm not sure that it's true. I'm not sure that the residuals should be beta distributed. I don't think so.
You don't think so?
Actually, this is something we need to check.
Well, because if
I
you
need
have,
to check.
for instance, if you have a standard linear model, I don't know good because then you take the a nonlinear function, no? I don't remember the model. But if you have a standard linear model, then if you have the variable that is.
Yeah, you won't say. Because here I assume that we have a directly distribution, so all the marginals have beta distribution.
Yeah.
But we have no clue about the residuals. Yeah, because for example, for the most simple case of the linear regression, you know that we assume that the residuals are standard, are Gaussian distributed. Here we have no clue about the noise. We know nothing about the noise. And actually, in the model, there is not really a noise.
But the noise is the difference between the real value and the fitted value that are two
beta distributions.
Then is the distribution.
I don't know if the sum of two beta distributions
Is
is a beta distribution.
Uh,
I'm not sure
yeah,
it's
I don't
I'm not sure
know.
it's the case.
If it was Gaussian, then it was Gaussian.
Yes, but with beta distribution, I'm not sure it's true.
Okay.
So I'm not sure it works. So yeah, with the silt, it's not very good, and I don't know if I there. So just before talking about the main drawbacks of the method, I wanted to come back to an early slide, just when we wrote the model. Okay, yeah. Because we assumed in the articulate case, or with the Dirichlet distribution, so that the mean value ut depends on the covariate. Okay, there is a multinomial logit function, but we assume that the parameter phi is the same for each response variable. This is not necessarily the case. So maybe, so I'm sorry, it's quite a mess because I did not have the time to write it well. Because if I take the data on R, this is something. Okay, I make the regression again. Here we got that. This we don't care, it's just for the scatter plots. Okay. Yeah, just for the QQ plots. Okay, so here I just put the scatter plots of the pseudo residuals for the send component. And in axis, this is the water depth. So I remind you that normally, whatever the covariate is, the pseudo residuals should follow a standard Gaussian. But here you can see that there is some kind of problem. Okay, the variability goes decreasing. Yeah. So maybe if the variability dispersion is decreasing, maybe that the dispersion parameter phi depends actually on the covariate, that is the water depth. And it is the same for the silt component or the clay component. So this is actually not a problem because do I talk? No, I did not talk about this in the slides, but we can also decide to introduce a relation between the dispersion parameter phi, and we can suppose that it is a linear computation h of phi, where h is a link function, well chosen, should be, I don't know, what letter did I not take? Okay. Okay, maybe the dispersion parameter will depend on the covariate. Here, because dispersion parameter should be strictly positive, it is possible to choose a link function for h that is the log. Okay. This way, log of phi t will be a real value, negative or positive, and we can assume that it follows that there is a linear combination with the covariate. So this is something that is also possible. we can make the dispersion parameter depend on the covariate. I will not make it on R now, but because it actually produced not exactly the same fit, but it was really close. It did not change much. But we had more nice, we had nicer scatter plots of the residuals. Okay, just to sum up the drawbacks and advantages of the different methods that we talked about. The first one was the idea of transforming the data. This is the oldest idea. It's quite simple, but the problem was that maybe we can introduce a lot of bias when we go back to the original scale with the inverse transformation, because in general, the inverse transformation is not linear. And the second drawback was that the interpretation of the coefficient estimates is impossible or really difficult. Okay, because all the estimations are done in the transform scale. We have no clue at all with the signification of the estimate. On the other hand, the interpretation of the estimates with beta or direct regression is very easy. We estimate the mean value, the dispersion parameter, and there is an interpretation for each parameter beta k or alpha k here in terms of odds ratio. So this is a huge advantage. But there is also one big drawback that I did not mention before, is that with the directed distribution, there is a very strong structure of independence between the marginals. Why is that? Because actually, if you take some independent random variables with gamma distributions of shape alpha, I, and 1, and if we denote V, the sum of those gamma distributions, we have the random vector ui divided by V that follows Dirichlet distribution. So somehow there is an independent structure that is hidden in each Dirichlet distribution. There is strong structure of independence, and that could be an issue. In our model, it worked well, but maybe if we study a regression of components that are highly correlated or with a strong structure of dependence, maybe the Dirichlet distribution will not perform very well. Because after all, there is a strong pattern of independence hidden here. So we don't really know. We don't really know. Just a reminder for the gamma distribution of shape A and P. This is a random variable with density given here. Okay, so you still recognize some key elements of the beta distribution or gamma or Dirichlet distribution. Okay, so I think that's all for today. Just wanted to present some models in the static, some regression problems from a static point of view. Next week, we will try to adapt those models, but on dynamic modeling. That is that next time, all the response variables, I denoted y1, and it depends on the time. This time, next time, it will be the time. Okay, So we will consider time series of compositional data because we will follow, for example, the composition of a sediment or the proportion of tree cover in the forest. But we will study it along the time, and we will try to propose good models to study this kind of process. So that will rely on the different distributions that we saw here today. Obviously, if you have any questions, I am available. And if you want to have some the PDF of that, don't forget to ask me. To ask me my email address. I could give it to you, and I will send you the PDF with all the proofs and all the computation.
In fact, it is on the site of Ecodep. If you look at
it will be on the
his
site
name.
of Ecodep. I will give it to
Oh, but it is you have your photos already on the site of Ecodep, and there is a link to your homepage.
Yes, but I did not create my own page yet.
Oh, but okay, we shall discuss. So let's stop here. So I stop recording, okay?
And if you have any questions now, I have no problem.